Secret order in Berlin. Berlin was a dying beast, its body torn apart by the relentless bombing, its veins running dry with the blood of soldiers and civilians alike. The air smelled of smoke and despair, and even the crows, those black-winged scavengers of war, seemed hesitant to land on the ruined buildings. I had seen cities crumble before, but this was something different. Berlin wasn't just falling. It was disintegrating, consumed by its own hubris. I had been sent here with one objective: locate and extract Dr. Heinrich Fock, a physicist whose work had attracted too much attention from too many powerful people. If I failed, the Soviets would have him within hours, and that was a scenario my superiors found unacceptable. The world was already shifting into its next war, though no one dared to say it out loud. And men like Fock were not just scientists. They were keys to power. My orders were clear, but war had a way of turning orders into riddles. Nothing in Berlin was simple. The city was a labyrinth of desperation and shifting alliances. Every street was a battlefield, every survivor a potential informant or a threat. I had been given a name, an address, and a warning. Fock was no fool. He would not go willingly, and if he suspected betrayal, he would vanish like smoke in the ruins. The man had spent years designing weapons of war. He knew better than anyone how to avoid capture. The address led me to a shattered apartment complex near Tiergarten. The building stood like a broken tooth in the skyline, its windows hollow, its walls scarred by bullets and fire. I climbed the stairs cautiously, my Colt M1911 heavy in my hand. Every step echoed in the emptiness. Inside, the apartment was stripped bare. No furniture, no signs of life. But on the floor, a single sheet of paper lay untouched, as if placed there deliberately. Too late, Herr Gilmore. The game is already in motion. My blood ran cold. Someone knew I was coming. A rustling behind me. I spun, gun raised. The shadow moved fast. A figure darted through the door, vanishing into the darkness of the hall. I fired once, the bullet sparking against concrete. Footsteps, rapid and fading. Whoever they were, they knew the city better than I did. And they had just confirmed my worst fear. I wasn't the only one looking for Fock. I rushed after the fleeing figure, my boots pounding against the cracked floorboards. But Berlin was a city of shadows and ghosts, and within seconds, they were gone. The hallway was empty except for the lingering scent of sweat and gunpowder, a faint trace of movement that disappeared like a whisper in the wind. I cursed under my breath, lowering my weapon, my mind racing through possibilities. Someone had been waiting for me. Someone who knew my name, my objective, and the very moment I would arrive. That meant either intelligence had been leaked, or Fock himself had set a trap. Either way, I was already steps behind in a game where failure wasn't an option. I needed a new lead. The address was a dead end, but the message, it meant something. The game is already in motion. Fock was alive, that much was certain, but he was moving, perhaps anticipating my arrival, or worse, being moved by someone else. If the Soviets had already found him, this mission was a corpse, and I was just waiting for the last bullet. Outside, the city groaned under the weight of war. Fires burned in the distance, the sky choked with black smoke that twisted and curled like dying fingers. I walked fast but not too fast, blending into the chaos, my coat pulled tight around me, my mind working through the map I'd memorized. There was one man in Berlin who might know where Fock had gone, though I would rather face a firing squad than ask him for a favor. Maximilian Rieger had once been a journalist, back when words still mattered more than bullets. Now he was something else, an informant, a survivor, a man who traded secrets like currency. If Fock had moved, Rieger would know. He had a way of knowing everything before anyone else. Finding him wasn't hard. The basement of an abandoned cafe near Nollendorfplatz, a place where desperate men gathered to barter, drink, and forget that the city was crumbling around them. The air was thick with sweat and cigarette smoke, and the dim candlelight cast long, flickering shadows across the cracked walls. Rieger sat at a table in the back, a thin man with sharp eyes and a smirk that never quite reached them. "You look worse than last time," he said, swirling a glass of something that might have been whiskey or just gasoline in disguise. "And you look exactly the same," I replied, sitting across from him, placing my hands flat on the table so he could see I wasn't here to play games. "I need to find Fock." His smirk widened slightly, but there was no amusement behind it. Funny thing about men like Fock. When the walls start closing in, They don't wait to be rescued. They disappear. I leaned in, lowering my voice just enough to let the weight of it settle between us. I don't have time for riddles, Max. You either help me, or I walk out of here and let the Soviets know exactly who's been selling information to both sides. Let's see how long that smirk lasts when they come knocking. His eyes darkened, but he didn't flinch. Instead, he took another slow sip, considering his options. Finally, he exhaled and nodded toward the door. Falk was seen near Alexanderplatz 2 nights ago. He was meeting someone. A woman. That's all I know. It wasn't much, but it was something. I pushed back from the table, already planning my next move. As I reached the door, Rieger's voice stopped me. Be careful, Gilmore. Some men are worth saving. Others, not so much. I didn't answer. I stepped out into the cold, the city waiting, its secrets buried beneath the rubble. If Falk was still in Berlin, I would find him. But the question that lingered heavy and unspoken was whether he truly wanted to be found. Alexanderplatz was a graveyard of shattered glass and broken promises, a place where the past and the future blurred into a single, desperate present. Once it had been the heartbeat of the city, alive with movement, commerce, people hurrying to lives that no longer existed. Now it was a battlefield of ghosts, the ruins whispering of what had been and what never would be again. The closer I got, the heavier the air became, thick with smoke, fear, and the distant echoes of artillery fire. Somewhere, not too far from here, the Soviets were advancing, their boots crushing what little hope remained beneath them. Time was slipping away like sand through torn fingers, and Falk, if he was still alive, was running out of places to hide. I moved carefully through the wreckage, avoiding the eyes of those who lurked in the ruins, scavengers and survivors alike. A city on the verge of collapse had no shortage of either. If Falk had been here 2 nights ago, he wouldn't have stayed long. Not if he had any sense. But the woman, she was the piece that didn't fit. Falk was a man who worked alone, a man who trusted no one. If he had met someone, it meant something. Either she was helping him, or she was the reason he was running. Either way, I needed to find her. The streets told their own stories if you knew how to listen. Blood on the pavement, fresh enough to glisten in the dim light. A spent shell casing near a doorway, a sign that someone had been desperate or foolish or both. A man in a tattered coat watching from the shadows, his eyes darting away when he realized I had seen him. The city breathed in its own agony, and somewhere in that breath was the answer I needed. Near what was left of an old bookstore, I found my first real lead. A body, crumpled against the bricks, the coat still warm, the wound still bleeding. He had been shot in the back, executed rather than killed in combat. Someone had silenced him, and not long ago. I crouched, searching his pockets, looking for anything that might tell me who he was or why he had been left here like discarded paper. A scrap of cloth, something torn from a dress, clenched in his fist. A woman's dress. I stood, scanning the streets. Someone had been here moments ago. Someone had seen what I had just found. And then I heard it. The soft sound of footsteps, quick but trying to stay quiet, moving through the rubble. I turned, my hand instinctively gripping the pistol beneath my coat, and followed. She wasn't fast enough. Fear makes people reckless, makes them sloppy, makes them forget that running draws more attention than standing still. I caught up to her near a burned-out tram, grabbing her arm before she could vanish into the ruins. She struggled, but she was small, thin, her breath coming in sharp, terrified gasps. She wasn't a soldier. She wasn't trained for this. "Let me go," she hissed, trying to twist free, but I held firm. "I'm not here to hurt you," I said, keeping my voice low, steady. "I'm looking for Falk." The moment I said his name, something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, fear, maybe both. She stopped struggling, but her body remained tense, coiled like a wire pulled too tight. "You're too late," she whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. "They have him." The words sent a chill down my spine, colder than the Berlin wind. "Who?" She hesitated, glancing past me, her eyes scanning the ruins as if expecting someone to emerge from the shadows. "The Soviets." My grip tightened slightly, though not out of anger, out of something closer to desperation. "When?" "Last night." The city around me seemed to close in, the walls of the ruined buildings pressing tighter, the sky darker, the air heavier. "Last night." That meant Falk was already deep in Soviet hands. Or worse, already on a train heading east. If that was true, my mission was over before it had even truly begun. But something about the way she said it, the way her eyes flickered, the way her breath caught at the end of her sentence, there was something she wasn't saying. I let go of her arm, but I didn't step back. "You're lying." Her jaw tightened, but she didn't look away. "If they knew I was here, they would kill me. Just like him." She gestured toward the body I had found, her voice brittle, breaking. "You don't understand. Falk isn't a prisoner. He went to them." For a moment, the world seemed to tilt beneath me, as if the ground itself had shifted. The thought had never crossed my mind. Falk defecting. It didn't make sense. He was too smart for that, too paranoid, too aware of the cost of betrayal. But if it was true, if he had gone willingly, then everything I had believed about this mission had been wrong. She must have seen the doubt in my eyes because she exhaled sharply, stepping closer. "You don't have much time," she said, her voice urgent now, stripped of deception. "They're moving him tonight. If you want to stop him, you have to do it now." I stared at her, at the desperation in her face, at the unspoken plea behind her words. I had come to Berlin to find a man who needed saving. But now I had to ask myself, was Falk the one who needed saving, or was I the one being played? The night swallowed Berlin whole, its broken streets turning into an endless maze of shifting shadows and whispered fears. Fires still burned in the distance, their glow painting the ruins in shades of dying embers, while the distant echoes of artillery reminded everyone that time was a luxury long lost. I moved quickly, my mind working through the woman's words, turning them over like puzzle pieces that refused to fit together. Falk had gone willingly, she had said. But why? What had the Soviets offered him that was worth walking straight into their hands? I didn't trust her. I didn't trust anyone in the city anymore. But trust wasn't necessary. Information was. And if she was right, if they were moving Falk tonight, then this might be the last chance to intercept him before he disappeared across the border, beyond reach, beyond consequence. The woman, she never gave her name, led me through the ruins with a confidence that suggested she had lived in them for far too long. She knew which streets to avoid, which buildings still had walls sturdy enough to provide cover, which alleyways weren't worth the risk. She moved with a purpose that unsettled me. People who were truly afraid didn't move like that. They hesitated. They second-guessed. But she walked like someone who had already made peace with whatever came next. We stopped near an old railway yard, its tracks twisted and broken, its cars rusting where they stood abandoned. It had once been a place of movement, of industry, of life. Now, it was just another forgotten skeleton in a city of the dead. The Soviets controlled most of the rail lines now, using them to move supplies, prisoners, anything they considered valuable. If they were moving Falk, this would be the place. The woman crouched behind a half-collapsed wall, her breath slow, steady. I watched her out of the corner of my eye, still trying to decide if she was leading me into a trap. She hadn't run. She hadn't tried to lose me in the ruins. That meant one of two things. Either she truly wanted Falk stopped, or she was playing a longer game, one I hadn't yet figured out. "Are you sure about this?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. She didn't look at me, just nodded toward the tracks. "You'll see soon enough." And then, like clockwork, they arrived. A convoy small but efficient, Soviet trucks rolling in under the cover of darkness, their engines low, their lights dim. Soldiers moved quickly, their weapons ready, their movements practiced. This wasn't chaos. This wasn't the usual frantic scramble of an army seizing a collapsing city. This was precise, controlled, planned. Then I saw him. Falk. He was thinner than I had expected, his face sharper, his eyes hollowed by something deeper than exhaustion. But he wasn't bound. He wasn't being dragged. He was walking alongside the Soviet officers, speaking to them, gesturing with his hands as if explaining something important. The men around him listened, their faces unreadable, their body language giving away nothing. The woman beside me tensed. "Now do you believe me?" I did. But belief wasn't enough. I had come here to extract Falk, to bring him back before the Soviets could use him. But looking at him now, seeing the way he moved, the way he spoke, this wasn't a prisoner. This was a man making a deal. Something inside me twisted. I had risked everything to find him. And he had walked away willingly. A choice lay before me, heavy as the pistol at my side. I could finish the mission, stop Falk before he disappeared into the Soviet machine, take him back by force if necessary. Or I could let him go, let him make whatever devil's bargain he had chosen. Neither choice felt right. And in war, the choices that don't feel right are usually the only ones you have left. I held my hand on the gun, feeling the cold steel clench my fingers, my thoughts racing like a wild animal in a trap. I had come to Berlin to save a man who didn't seem to want to be saved. If Falk had really surrendered himself to the Soviets voluntarily, if he was making a deal, what did that mean for me? For the mission? For everything I believed to be true? The woman next to me was looking at him as if she had seen a ghost. There was more than just anxiety in her eyes, something more. I couldn't tell if it was disappointment or pain or anger, but I knew the feeling. I felt it myself. I could have just walked away, disappear into the ruins, merge with this dead city, and let Falk make his choice. But this was not an ending I could accept. I took a deep breath and was about to act when I saw something I didn't expect. Falk suddenly stopped talking. He stood between the two officers, his face expressionless, but his hand, with a barely perceptible movement, pointed something in my direction. A barely perceptible gesture, no more than a lingering finger on his coat pocket, but I understood. It was a signal. I gritted my teeth. Damn it. He didn't betray me. He was playing his own game. I didn't have time to figure out what it was, because in a second everything went to hell. The roar of an explosion tore through the night. Flames erupted from the right side of the track, scattering debris, throwing people into the air, mixing screams, smoke, and chaos into a single roar. The soldiers screamed. One of them fell with a bullet through his head. The shots tore through the darkness, and I rushed forward without hesitation. The woman behind me shouted something, but I couldn't hear her anymore. I moved instinctively, using the chaos as cover. Falk did too. He dodged one guard, elbowed another, pulled out his gun, and started shooting. He wasn't a helpless victim. He had been waiting for this moment. I reached him in seconds, adrenaline coursing through every nerve of my body. "You took a long time, bitch," he muttered, firing back. "I thought you sold out," I replied, covering him from the other side. "I thought the same about you." This was Berlin. Everyone betrayed someone here. We were breaking through the rubble, Soviet soldiers screaming behind us, bullets whizzing past our ears. The woman was there too, her silhouette gliding through the rubble, holding something in her hands, maybe explosives, maybe another secret. I no longer knew whose side she was on, but it didn't matter now. It all came down to a choice. We could run, or we could finish what we started. I chose the latter. And then it all came to its true end. One bullet, one moment, one choice after which nothing could be changed. And now it really was the end, but not the one I expected.